Trevor Matich is back on the program. Trevor, you've been with us since the beginning. Thank you for being a huge part of BYU Sports Nation. Here we go, another college football season, baby.
I can't wait. I appreciate you guys having me on. You guys do a fantastic show, and I love coming on with you guys. Thank you.
You're the guest that most people say, I love when Trevor's on. So that is awesome. Thank you for being great. Let's talk about BYU's situation. Certainly quarterback situation, what everyone's talking about. Bear Bachmeier reportedly is going to win this job. I will be shocked if he does not. What do you make of the probability that a true freshman will start game one for the first time in BYU football history?
Yeah, it's kind of weird, right? But we're in this position because the senior quarterback we thought was going to start, Jake Retzloff, had his situation and he had to transfer out. And so they've got to make lemonade out of lemons here. And that's what they've got to do. I mean, having a true freshman, if he is the one that's going to start, Bear Bachmeier, a freshman, the situation is the playbook. It's how much of the playbook will offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick be able to open up for him if he is the starter, and how quickly will he be able to process that information? Because you can put a freshman in the classroom in front of the whiteboard and ask him questions and he'll draw up the right decisions on the whiteboard. But during the game, you've got to make those decisions much more quickly, because if you don't, you're going to get hit in the ear hole from the helmet, right? So these are things that they've got to consider and they've got to work around. It's not just knowing what to do. It's also being able to process the information fast enough to actually get it done in a game situation. And that's one thing that we won't know if Bear is the starter until after we see him in live game action.
We will see if he officially wins that job and when and if they announce that. Do your expectations change if BYU does start Bear Bachmeier versus McKay Hillstead, who has a little more experience in college?
You know what? It would, to a degree. Because, again, we talk about the ability to process the information quickly enough, and Hillstead does have more experience. And so that makes a difference. I mean, he's got more knowledge of this offense, but even more than that, he's got more knowledge of opposing defenses. And I think that's a big key, because knowing your own offense is important, but you've got to know the opposing defense and what they're doing and how the coverage matches up with the pass patterns you're throwing at them and different pressures and things like that in order to really maximize your potential as a quarterback. And so, you know, that's the thing that they're going to need to think about. You know, it's one of the things that they're going to need to think about, because Hillstead is a guy that is really fast. He's got a nice arm. He's got experience. And if he were the starter, I think you'd have a better chance of winning early. But I think that down the road, I think the upside is with Bear Bachmeier. Now, how far down the road is that? Well, I don't know. And the schedule plays out well if they do start Bear as a freshman, because they start with 3 games that really they should win. If they want to do what if they are able to do what they want to do this year, they should win all 3 of those first games, the non-conference games: Portland State, Stanford, and East Carolina. Although I think Stanford, but especially East Carolina, could be tricky for BYU. But even so, they've got to win those games if they're good enough to compete for the Big 12. And given that there is also a bye week after the Stanford game, the second non-conference game, means that if they do start the freshman, he'll have time to kind of get a little runway, to get out of first gear into second gear, maybe even into third gear, get some game experience against teams that BYU should be able to beat with a bye in there, so that he'll be able to kind of take a breath. And that, I think, improves his ability to perform once they get into conference play, to approach what Hillstead might be able to do. And this is another part of what the coaches need to decide on.
Odds makers have BYU from 6.5 wins to ESPN's FPI coming out over the weekend saying 8.7 wins. What's your expectation in the 12-game regular season for BYU at this point?
You know, I think it's somewhere in between. As I look at that schedule, I can see 8 wins there, and then if everything comes together, they could get 10. And the problem is that the Big 12 is just as tricky this year as it was last year. I mean, it's a deep conference with a lot of experienced quarterbacks, and BYU, if they start Bear Bachmeier, is not going to have an experienced quarterback until he earns his own experience over the course of the first half of the season. And so this is a difficult a difficult schedule for BYU to kind of run. And people look at last year and they see them as an 11-2 team. Do keep in mind, though, that the ball bounced their way a few times. I mean, Oklahoma State and Utah, they needed a desperation last-minute drive in order to score the winning points in both of those games. And they made the plays, to their credit, but it's not like they blew everybody out last year. And so the 11 wins they earned and they deserved. But I think people shouldn't base this year's projection of wins on what BYU did last year. So I can see them right now kind of with a baseline of 8. And then if things go well and if they stay healthy, they could go up from there.
It's a little tricky because if Jake Retzloff had returned, we'd be talking about the Big 12 title game. Instead, we're trying to manage expectations. Talking to Trevor Matich on BYU Sports Nation. Besides quarterback, what questions do you have about this BYU football team walking into the season?
Well, I would say, first of all, cover corner, because they lost a couple of experienced stars off of last year's team when they led the nation with 22 interceptions as a team. And so now all of a sudden they're bringing in guys that are developing. They're guys that are talented, that were highly recruited for the most part, that now need to show that they've developed into quality Big 12 starters. And until they prove that on the field in games, that's still a bit of an unknown. I think that the team likes what they've got there, but I think that it's the kind of a thing that BYU has to believe it when they see it. And then I think edge rusher is going to be a big deal. Last year, they didn't have a lot of dynamic edge rushers. I mean, they had guys that were great effort and just mean, nasty football players that batted a lot of passes, but they didn't get to the quarterback and take him down a lot. They didn't have a lot of sacks. And so the combination of cover corner and edge rusher is something that they'll need to prove that they can do, because if either one of those is not good enough, then they'll give up a lot more passing yards than they did last year.
They were number 3 in pass efficiency defense, which was amazing. You mentioned the interceptions as well. Number 1 in the country. What positions are the most strong for BYU at this point?
Well, I love defensive tackle. Keanu Tanuvasa is shaping up to be a real star coming over from Utah. If you look at the defensive tackle roster, they've got 6 guys that are 300 pounds plus, including a transfer from Oklahoma State who's 340. So they've got a lot of size inside, and that's important because guys like that, hopefully, they hope will be able to push the pile into the quarterback's face and be able to stop the run, which will help everything else that happens outside of them. So that's important. Linebacker, I think this will be one of the best linebacker groups in the Big 12, one of the better linebacker groups in the country. I think Isaiah Glasker and Jack Kelly, both of those guys have a chance to be in the NFL, and they are both so fast and so mobile that I think people think that they're kind of small guys, but they're both around 240 pounds. These are big guys that have that kind of mobility and that kind of explosiveness. Those are the places that I think you have the strength of the team at defensive tackle and at linebacker. And when you're strong up the middle on defense, it is a great start.
Isaiah Glasker has put on 51 pounds since he came to BYU. How much weight did you put on from when you graduated high school to when you were at BYU at your max?
I was 207 pounds out of high school.
207?
204 pounds. 207 is a center. I mean, I couldn't play safety at 207. I think for a lot of high school teams this year, but these days. But when I got back from my mission to Mexico, I was 204. So I started at 204, and then I played at my junior year. The next year after I got off my mission, I was like 230, 238, and I was 262 my senior year. So, but this was back in the day. Nowadays, that's too small to play.
Hey, 58 pounds. That's a lot of PB&J in the middle of the night. That's what we're talking about. ESPN's Trevor Matich is on BYU Sports Nation. Where does BYU stack up in the Big 12 race preseason, in your opinion?
I think BYU in the preseason, when you look at it now, stacks up as one of probably 6 or 7 teams that has a chance to win this conference. And it all depends on how things go. I mean, they finished tied for the conference lead in the regular season last year, missed the conference championship game because of a tiebreaker. And this year, who's to say who's going to win it? I mean, people are picking Kansas State. I think Arizona State has a really good chance. I think Utah is going to be really, really tough. TCU, and Texas Tech are going to be really strong. And so really this comes down to 1 or 2 mistakes per game is going to determine who is going to come out of the Big 12. And BYU, with their style of play and their kind of player that they recruit there, has a chance to be very disciplined. And they've got to be, because this conference is not going to come down necessarily to which team's the most talented. I think there's a lot of teams that are talented enough to beat anybody else in the conference. It's going to come down to who makes the fewest mistakes. Now, for BYU, it's also going to depend on how the quarterback position develops, especially if it's Bear Bachmeier, because the Big 12 right now probably has 6 quarterbacks that can be drafted. You know, you've got guys at Arizona State, Iowa State, Kansas State, Arizona, Kansas. You've got a lot of really good, Baylor, for goodness sake, Texas Tech, TCU. These are all quarterbacks that are likely to have a chance to play in the NFL. And guys with experience, and if BYU comes in with a freshman, then that's the place that they've got to compensate for early. And keep in mind that what Bear will have to do if he is the starter is take what's there and don't try to be a hero. He's got to not try to show everybody how great he is. He just needs to take what the defense gives him, protect the ball, and let the defense and the running game win.
It's about to be days of 47 up in here, which is a funny number. He wears 47, by the way, because he played middle linebacker and running back until about 8th, 9th grade. And so it's a weird number, but it's what he wears. Let's finish with this. The Big Ten had this idea, just an idea at this point, that they want maybe a 24 or 28 team playoff, which is pretty interesting. My question isn't whether that's a good thing or not. What's the sweet spot with expansion? Because it's at 12. They have to decide by December 1st what they're doing in 26. What number do you want in the college football playoff?
I think 12 is the perfect number. And I think they should start the playoffs sooner than they do now so that the season ends sooner. Right now, the championship game is late January, for goodness sake. And we saw the backup quarterback for Penn State transfer out during the playoff season last year because he had to in order to get to his new school and enroll in time to affect that transfer. And so if their starting quarterback, Drew Aller, Penn State now, had gotten injured during the playoff, their backup was gone. And so there's got to be a better balance between when the season ends and when the transfer portal opens. And if you expand the playoff, if you go to 16, then you're still having the same number of weeks. You're just adding a couple more games in the first week. If you go beyond that, now you're adding weeks to the season. And I don't know how you do that because the season's already starting in August. The first games are August 23rd coming up this weekend. And then, you know, the last game is going to be the end of January. And so that's just too many games. And I don't know how you would manage having more than 16 without either starting mid-August or extending the season even farther. And I don't think that's good for college football.
I would love mid-August just because I want football back. Let's go. I can't wait for week 0. Excited to watch all your coverage on ESPN. And we of course, appreciate the time coming on BYU Sports Nation. Thanks, Trev.
Thank you.